Admiral Vytherin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Vigilance. He watched the stars through the main window. Everything was calm. Everything was normal. His fleet of 37 warships moved through the Korath Nebula in perfect formation. They were the pride of the Concordat, the great empire that ruled this part of the galaxy. Vytherin had served the Concordat for over 60 cycles. He had seen wars. He had crushed rebellions. He had watched smaller races bow before the might of his people. The Concordat was old and powerful. No one challenged them. No one dared. The nebula glowed purple and blue around his ships. It was beautiful in a strange way. Vytherin allowed himself a small moment of peace. These patrol missions were boring, but they were easy. Nothing ever happened out here. "Admiral," said the sensor officer. His voice was strange. It shook a little. Vytherin turned to look at him. The officer was young, with 4 eyes like all of their species. Those 4 eyes were now very wide. His hands trembled over the controls. "What is it?" Vytherin asked. "We have a contact, sir. A single vessel. It just appeared at the edge of our sensor range." Vytherin was not worried. Ships passed through this area sometimes. Traders, miners, lost travelers. "What kind of vessel? Identify it." The officer worked his controls. The bridge was quiet. Other officers looked up from their stations. They could feel that something was wrong. There was tension in the air. "The computer is searching for a match," the officer said. "The ship design is not in our main database. It is searching the restricted files now." Vytherin frowned. Restricted files meant old enemies, dead civilizations, forgotten threats. Why would such a ship be here? The computer made a sound. A match was found. The sensor officer looked at his screen. His face changed. All the color drained from his skin. His 4 eyes went so wide that Vytherin could see the whites around them. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "Report!" Vytherin ordered. His voice was hard. "What is it?" The officer tried to speak. He failed. He tried again. When the words finally came, they were barely a whisper. "Human. The ship is human." The word hit the bridge like a bomb. Officers stopped moving. Some stood up from their chairs. Others gripped their consoles until their knuckles turned white. Vytherin felt ice spread through his chest. Human. The word carried so much weight, so much fear. Humans had arrived in the galaxy only 200 cycles ago. They were young. They were small. They had only a few dozen colony worlds. By all logic, they should be nothing. They should be weak. The Concordat had existed for 10,000 cycles. They had conquered hundreds of species. But humans were different. Vytherin had read the reports. He had studied the files. He knew what humans were capable of. Other empires had tried to subjugate them. The Villani had attacked a human mining colony. They thought humans would be easy slaves. Within 10 cycles, the Villani economy had collapsed. Their government fell apart. Their allies abandoned them. The humans had done it without firing a single weapon. They used trade. They used information. They used patience. The Kreth had tried to destroy a human world with biological weapons. The humans survived. They adapted. They remembered. And then slowly, over many cycles, they dismantled the Kreth military piece by piece, not through war, through sabotage, through intelligence, through fear. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not meet you in open battle. They watched, they waited, they planned. And when they finally moved, it was too late to stop them. And the Concordat had given them a reason to move. 30 cycles ago, the Concordat Council had ordered an attack on a human colony world called New Jakarta. They called it preemptive pacification. They feared that humans were growing too fast, becoming too strong, so they sent a fleet to end the threat before it grew. The bombardment lasted 3 hours. When it was over, 14 million humans were dead. Men, women, children. The colony was nothing but ash and fire. The Concordat had expected the other human worlds to surrender after that. They expected fear and submission. Instead, they got silence. The humans said nothing. They made no threats. They declared no war. They simply went quiet. And that silence was more terrifying than any battle cry. In the 30 cycles since New Jakarta, human ships had been seen at the edges of Concordat space. They never attacked. They never spoke. They just watched, scanning, recording, learning. And now one of those ships was here. Veteran walked to the main screen. He looked at the sensor image of the human vessel. It was small compared to his warships. It had a simple design, all hard angles and dark metal. It sat motionless at the edge of sensor range, just sitting there, watching. "Is it alone?" Vithrin asked. "Yes, Admiral, just one ship." "Why only one?" No one had an answer. Vithrin's second-in-command, a female officer named Sathra, stepped closer to him. She spoke in a low voice so others would not hear. "Admiral, we should leave. We should report this to High Command and withdraw." "Withdraw?" Vithrin turned to her. "From one ship." "It is a human ship," Sathra said. Her voice was tight with fear. "One human ship is never just one human ship. If they are here, they want us to know they are here. This is a message." Before Vithrin could respond, the communication officer spoke up. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission. It is coming from the human vessel." The bridge went completely silent. Every officer stared at the communication station. Vithrin felt his heart beating hard in his chest. "What kind of transmission?" he asked. "It is a data packet, sir. They are broadcasting it on all frequencies. They want us to receive it." Vithrin looked at the human ship on the screen. It had not moved. It made no aggressive action. It simply sat there, sending its message to the Concordat fleet. "Open it," Vithrin ordered. The officer hesitated. "Sir, it could be a virus, or a weapon, or—" "Open it," the officer obeyed. The main screen flickered, and then the message began to play. Vithrin watched, and as he watched, his fear turned to horror. The humans had finally broken their silence, and the Concordat would never be the same. The message filled the main screen. At first, it was just data, numbers, coordinates, timestamps. But then the images began. Vithrin saw a planet from space. It was blue and green, covered in oceans and forests. Cities sparkled on its surface like jewels. Ships moved in orbit around it. Millions of lights showed millions of lives. New Jakarta. This was New Jakarta before the attack. The image changed. Now there was fire. Concordat warships hung in the sky, raining death upon the world below. Missiles fell like burning rain. Cities vanished in clouds of flame and smoke. The oceans boiled where the weapons struck. The forest became ash. Vithrin remembered that day. He had not been part of the attack fleet, but he had seen the reports. He had read the numbers. 14 million dead. He had thought it was necessary. He had believed the council was right. Now, watching from the human perspective, he felt something different. He felt the weight of those 14 million lives. The images kept coming. Emergency recordings from the surface. People running through burning streets. Parents carrying children. Old ones falling and not getting up. Screams that had been captured by security systems and emergency beacons. And then came the names. The screen began to scroll. Name after name after name. Every single person who had died on New Jakarta. Their names, their ages, sometimes their faces. A baby, only 3 months old. A grandmother, 92 years old. A teacher, a doctor, a musician, a farmer, all dead, all remembered. The list went on and on. It would take hours to show every name. The bridge crew watched in complete silence. Some of them looked away. Others could not move. Vithrin stood frozen, watching the names scroll past. Sathra stepped up beside him. Her voice was barely a whisper. They kept records. They remembered every single one. "Of course they did," Vithrin said. His mouth was dry. "They are human. They always remember." The transmission changed again. Now it showed something different. Something that made Vithrin's blood run cold. It was a map. A detailed map of Concordat space. Every system, every planet, every defense station, every shipyard, every supply route, every secret military base. All of it was there, marked and labeled with perfect accuracy. The map showed fleet positions. It showed patrol schedules. It showed the personal addresses of High Council members. It showed the security codes for orbital defense platforms. It showed everything. Vithrin grabbed the edge of a console to keep himself standing. "How?" he whispered. "How do they have this?" No one answered. There was no answer. The humans had been watching for 30 cycles. They had been learning. They had been collecting information. They had spies everywhere. They had been inside concordate systems, reading secret files, copying protected data, and no one had known. Sathra was shaking. Admiral, if they have this information, they have probably shared it. The Villani, the Kreth, the Simorians, every race we have ever wronged. They all have this now. Vitharin understood what she meant. The Concordate had many enemies. They had conquered and oppressed dozens of species. Those species were quiet now because they feared Concordate power. But if they knew how to hurt the Concordate, if they had maps of every weakness, every vulnerability, the Empire would be attacked from all sides at once. This is not an invasion, Vitharin said slowly. This is a signal. They are telling everyone that the time has come. The transmission ended. The screen went dark. The human ship still sat motionless at the edge of sensor range. Vitharin turned to his crew. They were all looking at him. They wanted orders. They wanted him to tell them what to do. But what could he say? What could anyone do against this? Contact High Command, he ordered. Send them everything. They need to know what is happening. The communication officer tried. He worked his console for a long moment. Then he looked up with fear in his eyes. Admiral, I cannot reach High Command. All long-range communication channels are jammed. The jamming is coming from everywhere. There are signals blocking us from every direction. Vitharin felt the trap closing around him. The humans had planned this perfectly. One ship to deliver the message, hidden jammers to cut off communication, and somewhere out there, more ships waiting. Scan the area, he ordered. Find those jammers. Find any other ships. The sensor officer worked frantically. I am detecting energy signatures at the edge of the system. Multiple signatures. They are powering up now. How many? The officer checked his readings 3 times before answering. 47. No, wait. More are appearing. 62. 81. His voice cracked. Over 100 human ships are entering the system. 100 ships against 37. And those were just the ones showing themselves. How many more were hiding? Vitharin had spent his whole life believing that the Concordat was the greatest power in the galaxy. He had believed they were untouchable. Now he understood the truth. The Concordat had made an enemy they did not understand. They had attacked a species that did not forgive. They had killed 14 million people and thought there would be no cost. For 30 cycles, the humans had been preparing, building ships, making alliances, gathering information, waiting for the right moment. That moment was now. What do we do? Sathra asked. Her voice was small. She was not asking as a soldier. She was asking as someone who was very afraid. Vitharin looked at the human ships on the sensor display. They were not attacking. They were not moving closer. They were just sitting there, forming a ring around the system, waiting. That was the most terrifying part. They were in no hurry. They had all the time in the universe. We have to try to break through, Vitharin said. We have to warn the homeworld. We have to... Admiral, the communication officer interrupted. We are receiving another transmission from the lead human ship. Another message. Vitharin did not want to see it, but he had no choice. Show me, he said. The screen lit up again. This time it showed a face, a human face. An old woman with gray hair and dark eyes. She wore a simple military uniform with no decorations. She looked tired. She looked sad. But there was steel in her eyes. She did not speak. She just looked at the camera for a long moment. Then she held up a small photograph. It was an old picture, worn and faded. It showed a young woman smiling at the camera. My grandmother, the old human said. Her voice was calm and quiet. She was a teacher on New Jakarta. She taught children how to read. She was 43 years old when your ships came. The old woman put the photograph away. She looked directly at the camera, directly at Vitharin. We have been waiting for you, she said. All of us, for 30 years. The transmission ended. Vitharin stared at the empty screen. Around him, his crew was frozen with fear. Outside, 100 human ships waited in the darkness. And Vitharin finally understood what the humans wanted. They did not want to destroy the Concordate fleet. They wanted it to watch. The hours that followed were the longest of Vithorin's life. His fleet sat in the middle of the system, surrounded by human ships. No one moved, no one fired. The silence was worse than any battle. Vithorin stood on the bridge and tried to think. He had fought many enemies in his life. He knew how to win wars. But this was not a war. This was something else. Something he did not understand. The human ships held their positions. They formed a perfect ring around the Concordat fleet. Their weapons were powered but not aimed. Their shields were up but not at full strength. They were not preparing to attack. They were waiting. "Why do they not fire?" asked Captain Vorath. He was the commander of the Burning Dawn, the second largest ship in the fleet. His face appeared on the communication screen, and he looked confused and angry. "They have us surrounded. Why do they wait?" "Because they want us to think," Sathra said. She stood next to Vithorin, studying the tactical display. "They want us to understand what is happening. They want us to feel what is coming." "What is coming?" Vorath demanded. "What do they want?" No one had an answer. Vithorin ordered his officers to keep trying to contact the homeworld. They tried every frequency. They tried emergency codes. They tried bouncing signals off distant relay stations. Nothing worked. The jamming was complete. They were cut off from the rest of the Concordat. As the hours passed, the crew grew restless. Fear turned to anger. Anger turned to desperation. Some officers wanted to attack the human line. Others wanted to surrender. Others wanted to run. "We should fight," said Captain Mayrath of the Iron Storm. His ship was the fastest in the fleet. "We should pick a point in their line and break through. We can get at least some ships out. We can warn the homeworld." "And leave the rest of us to die?" asked Captain Solara. She commanded the Starfall, a heavy cruiser. "That is your plan? We run and hope for the best?" "It is better than sitting here," Mayrath shouted. "Every moment we wait, they grow stronger. Every moment, more of their ships could be coming." Vithorin listened to his captains argue. He understood their fear. He felt it himself. But something told him that attacking would be a mistake. The humans had not come here to fight. If they wanted to destroy the fleet, they could have attacked without warning. They could have used the element of surprise. Instead, they revealed themselves. They sent messages. They showed their faces. They wanted something else. "Everyone be silent," Vithorin ordered. His voice cut through the argument. The captain stopped talking and looked at him. "No one will attack. No one will run. We will wait and see what they want." "Wait?" Mayrath was shocked. "Admiral, with respect, waiting is exactly what they want us to do. They are playing with us. They are trying to talk," Vithorin said, "and we will listen." He turned to the communication officer. "Open a channel to the human fleet. Tell them we are ready to negotiate." The officer obeyed. For a long moment, there was no response. Then the screen flickered, and the old woman appeared again. "Admiral Vithorin," she said. She knew his name. Of course she did. They knew everything. "I am Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Forces. Thank you for being willing to speak." Vithorin stepped forward. He tried to keep his voice steady. "What do you want? Why are you here?" Admiral Chen looked at him with those dark, tired eyes. "We want justice, Admiral. We want the leaders who ordered the attack on New Jakarta to answer for what they did. We want the Concordat to acknowledge its crimes. And if we refuse?" Chen did not smile. "You will not refuse. You cannot refuse. Even now, your empire is falling apart. Look." She pressed a button. The screen split into multiple images. Vithorin saw news feeds from across Concordat space, riots on colony worlds, protests in major cities, ships deserting from military bases, politicians fleeing their offices. "The information we released went everywhere," Chen said. "Every species you have oppressed now knows exactly how weak you are. Every enemy you have made is preparing to move. Your allies are abandoning you. Your people are losing faith. This is not an invasion, Admiral. This is a reckoning." Vithorin watched the chaos on the screens. He saw his empire crumbling in real time. Everything the Concordat had built over 10,000 cycles was falling apart in a matter of hours. "You planned this," he said. "For 30 cycles, you planned this." "Yes," Chen said. "We are very patient, Admiral. Your people killed 14 million of ours. Did you think we would just accept that? Did you think we would forget?" Vithorin had no answer. The truth was, yes, that was exactly what the council had thought. They had believed humans were too weak, too scattered, too primitive to ever challenge the Concordat. They had underestimated them completely. What happens now? Vithrin asked. Now you have a choice, Chen said. You can fight us, your fleet against ours. You have 37 ships. We have 142. You might destroy some of us, but you will not win. Your empire will still fall. Your people will still suffer. She paused. Her face softened just slightly. Or you can surrender. Not to be conquered, not to be enslaved, but to face justice. The leaders who ordered New Jakarta will stand trial. The victims will be acknowledged. Reparations will be made. And then, maybe after many years, our peoples can learn to live together in peace. Vytherin stared at her. He thought about his fleet, his crew, his people back home. He thought about the 14 million names that had scrolled across his screen. You could destroy us, he said slowly. You have the power. Why offer peace? Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Because destroying you would make us like you, she said. And we did not spend 30 years preparing just to become the monsters we hate. She looked directly at him. We are human, Admiral. We remember everything. We forgive nothing. But we also know that revenge is empty. It does not bring back the dead. It does not heal the wounded. It only creates more pain. She straightened in her chair. We want justice, not revenge. There is a difference. Your people taught us that difference when they bombed New Jakarta. We will never thank you for that lesson, but we learned it well. The transmission ended. The screen went dark. Vytherin stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by terrified officers. Outside, the human fleet waited, patient, calm, certain of their victory. He thought about fighting. He thought about running. He thought about all the choices he had made in his long life. And then he thought about those 14 million names. He turned to Saithra. Signal the fleet, he said. Tell them to power down their weapons. Saithra stared at him. Admiral, we are going to surrender, Vytherin said, not because we are cowards, but because they are right. What we did was wrong, and it is time to answer for it. He looked at the human ships one more time. Maybe, he said quietly, that is the only way any of us survive what is coming. Vytherin's order to surrender split the fleet in half. Some captains agreed immediately. They powered down their weapons and raised white signals on their ships. They were tired. They were afraid. They understood that fighting would only bring death, but others refused. I will not surrender to these creatures, Captain Mayrath shouted over the communication channel. His face was red with anger. I am a warrior of the Concordat. I have served for 40 cycles. I will not bow to anyone, especially not these short-lived animals. Mayrath, think about what you are doing, Vytherin said. The humans have us surrounded. They have more ships. They have better information. If we fight, we die. All of us. Then we die with honor. Mayrath cut the communication. His ship, the Iron Storm, began to move. It turned toward the human line and powered up its weapons. 3 other ships followed him. The Burning Shadow, the Crimson Fang, the Destroyer of Worlds. 4 warships broke formation and raced toward the nearest human vessels. Vytherin watched helplessly. He shouted orders, but the ships did not respond. Their captains had made their choice. The human fleet reacted instantly. Small, fast ships moved to intercept the attackers. They did not fire killing shots. Instead, they targeted engines and weapon systems. Precise hits, surgical strikes. The Concordat ships were disabled in seconds. The Iron Storm drifted dead in space, its weapons destroyed, its engines smoking. The other 3 ships suffered the same fate. Not one human vessel was damaged. We could have destroyed them. Admiral Chen's voice came over an open channel. We chose not to. We do not want more death today, but we will defend ourselves if we must. Vytherin felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that his people were still alive. Shame that they had been defeated so easily. And respect, strange as it was, for an enemy that chose mercy over destruction. Signal the disabled ships, he ordered. Tell them to stand down. Their fight is over. The bridge crew obeyed. Slowly, the remaining fleet powered down completely. 37 Concordat warships sat motionless in space, their weapons cold, their shields down. They were defeated without a real battle ever being fought. And then the reports started coming in from home. The jamming stopped suddenly. Communication channels opened, and Vitharin learned what was happening across the Concordat. It was chaos. The Simorians had declared war. Their fleet was already moving toward Concordat border worlds. They were a small species, conquered by the Concordat centuries ago. Now they had allies, weapons, and information. They were taking back what was theirs. The Villani were doing the same. Their economy had been destroyed by humans years ago, but they had rebuilt in secret. Now they were striking at Concordat supply lines, cutting off food and fuel to major systems. The Kreth, bitter enemies since the biological weapon attacks, had closed all borders. Concordat ships in Kreth space were being seized. Concordat citizens were being arrested. Old debts were being collected. And it was not just foreign powers. Inside the Concordat itself, rebellion was spreading. Colony worlds that had been oppressed for generations were rising up. Military bases were being abandoned by soldiers who no longer believed in the cause. Politicians were fleeing the capital in private ships, trying to escape before the angry crowds found them. "It is happening everywhere," Saithra said. She was reading report after report, her face pale. "Everyone is turning against us. Everyone." Vitharin understood now. The humans had not just gathered information, they had shared it. They had given every enemy of the Concordat the tools they needed to fight back. They had turned the galaxy against the Empire, and they had done it without firing a shot. 30 cycles, Vitharin whispered. They spent 30 cycles building this moment. They talked to every species we ever wronged. They made alliances with every enemy we ever created. They were not preparing for war. They were preparing for this. He looked at the human fleet on the screen. They still held their positions, patient, calm, watching the Concordat burn. "This is not an invasion," he said. "This is an execution. They are letting our own sins destroy us." A new transmission came in. It was from the Concordat High Council. The picture was shaky, the audio broken. The council chamber was in chaos. Vitharin could see council members shouting at each other. Some were crying, some were trying to flee. High Counselor Rethvon appeared on screen. He was the oldest member of the council, the one who had ordered the new Jakarta attack 30 cycles ago. His face was gray with fear. "Admiral Vitharin," he said. His voice trembled. "You must help us. You must bring your fleet home. The humans are demanding that we surrender ourselves for trial. They want us to answer for our crimes. You must protect us." Vitharin stared at the screen. This was the man who had ordered the death of 14 million people. This was the man who had believed that humans were too weak to matter. This was the man who had brought all of this upon them. "Counselor," Vitharin said slowly, "your fleet is surrounded. Your empire is crumbling. Your allies have abandoned you, and you are asking me to save you from the consequences of your own actions." "I am ordering you," Rethvon shouted. "I am the High Counselor. You must obey." Vitharin thought about all the cycles he had served the Concordat, all the orders he had followed, all the things he had done in the name of the Empire. He had believed he was serving a great cause. He had believed he was on the right side. Now he saw the truth. "Counselor Rethvon," Vitharin said. His voice was calm and cold. 30 cycles ago, you ordered the murder of 14 million innocent people. You called it preemptive pacification. You thought you were being clever. You thought you were being strong." He paused. "You were wrong. And now the galaxy is making you pay for your mistake. I will not save you. I cannot save you. No one can." Rethvon's face twisted with rage and fear. "You are a traitor. You are—" Vitharin cut the transmission. He stood in silence for a long moment. His crew watched him, waiting. Some looked afraid. Others looked relieved. A few even looked proud. "The Concordat we served is dead," Vitharin said finally. "It died the moment we attacked New Jakarta. Everything since then has just been waiting for the end." He turned to face his officers. "Now we have to decide what comes next. We can fight and die for an empire that deserves to fall, or we can accept what we have done, face the consequences, and try to build something better." He looked at Saithra. Signal the human fleet. Tell Admiral Chen that we are ready to talk about terms. Tell her, he hesitated. Tell her we are ready to face justice. Sathra nodded. There were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling slightly. Yes, Admiral, she said. I think that is the right choice. Outside, the human fleet waited. Inside, the Concordat was falling apart. And somewhere in the middle, Vitherin began to understand something important. The humans were not their enemies. The humans had never been their enemies. The Concordat's real enemy had always been itself. 3 days passed before Admiral Chen came aboard the Eternal Vigilance. She arrived in a small shuttle with only 2 guards. No army, no weapons pointed at Concordat heads. She walked through the halls of the enemy flagship like she was visiting an old friend. Vatherin met her at the main airlock. He had thought long about this moment. What would he say? How would he act? He had been the enemy for so long. Now he did not know what he was. Admiral Chen was shorter than he expected. Humans were small creatures compared to his species. She was old, her hair completely gray, her face lined with years of worry, but her eyes were sharp and clear. Those eyes had seen things that Vitherin could not imagine. Admiral Vitherin, she said. Her voice was calm. There was no hatred in it. Thank you for receiving me. Vitherin bowed his head slightly. It was a gesture of respect that he had not given anyone in many cycles. Admiral Chen, thank you for not destroying us when you had the chance. Chen nodded. May we talk in private? Vitherin led her to his personal quarters. They sat across from each other at a small table. A window showed the stars outside. Human ships still surrounded the fleet, but their formation had relaxed. They were no longer in attack position. They were waiting. Your council members are being collected, Chen said. The ones who ordered New Jakarta. They will face trial at an independent court. Species from across the galaxy will judge them. We will not be their executioners. What will happen to them? That depends on the court, but I imagine they will spend the rest of their lives answering for what they did. She paused. We do not believe in death sentences, not even for them. Vitherin was surprised. You would let them live? After what they did to your people? Chen looked out the window for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. I have spent 30 years preparing for this day, Admiral. 30 years of planning, building, waiting. Do you know what kept me going all that time? Vitherin shook his head. Not hatred, Chen said. Hatred burns out. It consumes you. If I had let hatred drive me, I would have made mistakes. I would have acted too soon. I would have become something ugly. She looked at him directly. What kept me going was love. Love for my grandmother. Love for the 14 million people who died. Love for the children of New Jakarta who never got to grow up. I did this for them, to honor their memory, to make sure their deaths meant something. Vitherin did not know what to say. He had spent his whole life believing that humans were primitive, emotional, weak. He had thought that their short lives made them reckless and foolish. Now he saw how wrong he had been. You waited 30 years, he said slowly. You built alliances with every species we wronged. You gathered information on every weakness we had. You planned every step of this operation with perfect care. And you did it all for love? Yes, Chen said simply. Humans are capable of great patience when we have something worth waiting for. We remember those we lost. We carry them with us, and we do whatever it takes to honor them. She leaned forward. That is why we are not going to destroy your species, Admiral. Revenge would mean becoming like you. It would mean proving that we are no better than the ones who killed our families. We will not do that. We cannot do that. Vitherin felt something strange in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was shame. Deep, burning shame for everything he had been part of, for everything the Concordat had done. I served the Empire my whole life, he said. I followed orders. I believed I was doing the right thing. Now I see that I was just another tool of destruction. You were, Chen agreed, but you do not have to stay that way. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small data chip. She placed it on the table between them. This contains information about human relief efforts, she said. We are sending supplies to Concordat worlds that are suffering. Food, medicine, building materials. We are helping rebuild what your wars destroyed. Vitharin stared at the chip. You are helping us? After everything? We are helping the innocent, Chen said. The common people who had no voice in what their leaders did. They are not our enemies. They never were. She stood up and walked to the window. The light from distant stars made her gray hair shine like silver. My grandmother used to tell me stories, she said. Stories about a better future. A galaxy where all species could live together in peace. Where children could grow up without fear of war. Where the sins of the past could be forgiven, even if they could never be forgotten. She turned to face Vitharin. I do not know if that future is possible, but I know that it will never happen if we keep killing each other. Someone has to be the first to choose peace. Someone has to be the first to forgive. She held out her hand. It was a human gesture. Vitharin had learned what it meant. We cannot change what happened, she said, but we can choose what happens next. Will you help me build something better? Will you help me honor the dead by protecting the living? Vitharin looked at her hand. He thought about all the death, all the destruction, all the hatred that had brought them to this moment. He thought about his fleet, still surrounded by human ships. He thought about his people, scattered and lost across a crumbling empire. And he thought about those 14 million names. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand. I do not deserve forgiveness, he said. None of us do. Probably not, Chen agreed. But that is the thing about forgiveness. It is not about what people deserve. It is about choosing to move forward anyway. She shook his hand firmly. Welcome to the future, Admiral. It will not be easy. It will not be quick. But if we work together, maybe our children's children will live in a galaxy where something like New Jakarta never happens again. Vitharin felt tears in his eyes. He had not cried since he was young. He did not even know if his species could still cry. But somehow the tears came. Outside the window, the human and concordant ships floated together in space. No one was firing. No one was running. For the first time in 30 cycles, there was peace between their peoples. It was a fragile peace. It might not last. There would be trials and reckonings. There would be anger and pain. The wounds of New Jakarta would take generations to heal. But it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning was enough. Admiral Chen looked out at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, 14 million spirits were watching. Her grandmother was watching. We did it, grandmother, she whispered. We remembered, and we found a way to move on. The stars did not answer, but Chen felt warmth in her heart all the same. The war was over. Now the hard work of peace could finally begin.